Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
There are those days when everything seems to go south from the moment the alarm rings. Waking up, you just know this day isn't on your side. A stretch is met with a sharp twinge in your back. Slippers decide to play hide and seek and even betray you on the kitchen tiles. Toothpaste goes rogue, missing the mark, and for some reason, the morning coffee just doesn't hit right. That's the kind of morning Adriana was having. But she wasn't one to be easily discouraged. Life's full of highs and lows, and everyone's entitled to an off day. Besides, Adriana counted her blessings. A loving husband who was still in bed, his coaching session didn't start until 11, a fulfilling job, a chic apartment in the city, and a shiny new car. Just hope the car doesn't give me any trouble today, Adriana mused, pulling on her sleek leather boots. That'd just be the cherry on top. Predictably, the elevator was out of service. Only 5 floors, not a big deal, she convinced herself, thinking a bit of exercise might do her good. Downstairs, she was met by the always flustered building manager. "Morning, Adriana. I swear, that darn elevator went out at the crack of dawn. Been trying to get the repair guy here. He's promised by 7, but seems you're the early bird today. Oh, and Rodriguez from 25th is out with his dogs." With a chuckle, Adriana replied, "Carmen, it's fine. Just a chance for me to get a little workout." Carmen shot back playfully, "Adriana, always the charmer. But seriously, you don't look a day over 20. Feeling a bit flattered, Adriana checked her reflection in the shiny elevator door. She still had it, tall, graceful, with flowing brown locks, dressed in a chic green suit that set off her eyes. Even Eladio, their personal trainer, was taken aback during their first session together when she mentioned she was 35. He thought she was pulling his leg, only to be genuinely floored later when he saw her ID. "Anyway, Carmen, it's not the end of the world walking a couple of floors. By the way, how's Ines doing?" Adriana always had a genuine conversation with Carmen. The petite, silver-haired woman, always in her crisp uniform, reminded Adriana of her own grandmother, a theater veteran. She had that same sense of elegance, and Adriana could almost picture her, walking the aisles, handing out programs, casting fond glances her way. Carmen's granddaughter, Ines, was at the same university Adriana had attended. Adriana had been keen to offer Ines advice, which professors to approach, best places to get textbooks, and tons of other college life hacks. "Oh, she's loving it," Carmen said, her voice swelling with pride. After a few more minutes of friendly chatter, Adriana made her way to her car. Opting for street parking due to the warm weather, she was aiming to save time. But today had its own plans. As she settled in, she realized her phone was missing. The vivid image of it, left behind on her hallway shelf, flashed in her mind. "Ugh, multitasking's the devil." "Back I go," Adriana muttered, berating herself. Rushing back, she heard Carmen call out, "Forgot your phone, didn't ya?" Climbing the stairs 2 at a time, she reached her floor panting. Approaching her apartment, she noticed her door slightly ajar. "Did I forget to lock up too?" she wondered. At least she wouldn't disturb Eladio's sleep with her fumbling. Adriana cautiously opened the door and stepped inside. Now she needed to take off her boots, enter the hallway, grab her phone, and return, making sure to lock the door this time. To prevent another mishap, she mentally narrated each step before taking it. In the next moment, 2 things happened simultaneously. A ringing, feminine laughter echoed from deep within the apartment, and Adriana noticed a pair of women's sneakers in the hallway. "Adriana, eavesdropping isn't nice," her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "If you listen too much, you won't hear anything good about yourself." Adriana had always had a knack for eavesdropping, and oh, the tales it had told her. She'd unintentionally overheard conversations thrice before, each leaving an indelible mark on her journey. Rushing into her apartment, Adriana didn't even pause to slip off her boots. She snatched her phone from its resting place on the hallway table and tiptoed further inside, careful not to make her presence known. Lucky for her, the plush carpeting masked her steps flawlessly. Her first accidental foray into eavesdropping took her back to her 5th grade classroom. Back in grade school, academics came easy to Adriana. Her teacher, Miss Serrano, firm but always fair, was someone she looked up to. Even though Adriana was raised solely by her grandma after her parents' tragic death, she always showed up to school well-groomed, homework done, and lessons well-prepared. Her love for reading set her apart. Instead of playing tag during recess like most kids, she'd be curled up with a book, often meant for much older readers. Can you believe little Adriana from 3rd grade? Always with her nose in a book, Miss Serrano shared with a colleague. I tell her, honey, go play. Have some fun. But she prefers her books. Stubborn as a mule. Oh, Adriana Castro? The orphan whose grandma is friends with my cousin's husband, her colleague responded. Let her be. She's growing up surrounded by the arts. Her grandma works at the local theater and introduces her to all the classics. Who knows? All this reading might just make her someone special. Miss Serrano sighed. I just worry about her fitting in. Kids her age should be socializing. Her colleague laughed lightly. Remember when we thought Lope de Vega was profound? Let her read. Soon enough, boys and teenage drama will take over, and she might just put those books down. Isn't young Teodoro in your class reading Gabriel Garcia Marquez? Miss Serrano gave a reluctant nod, acknowledging the point. Despite Miss Serrano's concerns, Adriana wasn't an outcast. Sure, she hadn't really noticed Teodoro, the other bookworm on the playground. Outside of her grandma, the world of theater, and her books, her buddy Luz held a special place in her heart. They lived in neighboring buildings and had been thick as thieves since they were toddlers. Though they attended different schools, Adriana in public and Luz in a private institution, their bond remained strong. Once, a younger Adriana had innocently asked her grandma why they went to different schools. Her grandmother, with a touch of sadness, had explained, Darling, that school has a hefty price tag. With what I earn, it's a stretch. But seeing Adriana's downturned face, she quickly added, Listen, if you ace your grades all through elementary school, I'll see about getting you into Luz's school for middle school. Her grandma probably thought Adriana would make new friends in a few years or get used to catching up with Luz after school. But Adriana took it to heart. She excelled, becoming a star pupil. The stories Luz shared about her school, swimming lessons during gym, field trips to fun places, and movie days made Adriana yearn to be there with her. She knew her grandma's promise was for after elementary school, so she hung on to that hope. When Adriana rounded off the 4th grade with flying colors, Miss Serrano lavished praise on her grandma, emphasizing how well she'd raised Adriana. The message was clear. They needed to find a way to fund private school. To make that dream a reality, her grandma took a second job at the same theater and even parted with some cherished war medals that belonged to her father. As she gazed at her father's picture, Zoe whispered, Forgive me, Dad. But I've got a promise to keep to your great-granddaughter. The funds were all in place, and after a simple graduation event for the 4th graders, her grandma sat Adriana down and delivered the good news. Come September, sweetie, you'll be starting at a brand new school, she announced. Oh, Grandma, you're simply the best, Adriana said, wrapping her arms tightly around her grandmother. I promise, I'll work even harder. The most important thing, honey, is for you to be happy, her grandma replied with a smile. If this school is what will make you smile every day, then it's all worth it. Luz was the first to get the exciting update, and her joy mirrored Adriana's. This is awesome. Plus, my family just got a new place. We'd be moving soon. But now, we'll still see each other every day at school. I can't wait to introduce you to my crew. You'll fit right in. Adriana's emotions were mixed. Luz was her one true friend. But maybe this was a chance to expand her circle, especially if they were friends with Luz. The new school was impressive, a far cry from her previous one. Remembering the aging building, old desks, and her seasoned teachers made Adriana appreciate her new surroundings even more. The fresh three-story structure, updated security measures, and the hip, younger teachers made the old school seem like another world. The school uniform requirement was another silver lining. It meant she wouldn't have to worry about fitting in with her attire. Yet, a few weeks in, things took a turn. Her early success, with straight A's marking her first term, suddenly wavered. The once welcoming environment felt more like shifting sands beneath her feet. The bond with Luz seemed strained. While Luz's new friends weren't mean, their interests just didn't align with Adriana's. While they chatted about the latest trends and attended popular classes, Adriana often found herself on the sidelines. The blow to her grades was harder to digest. Her consistent performance suddenly dipped, with reasons that seemed flimsy at best. Teachers, who had earlier praised her, now seemed dismissive. Adriana remembered the condescending words of her math teacher after asking for feedback. "This isn't your old school, Adriana. You can't just keep redoing work here for better grades. You get what you deserve." The weight of it all bore down on Adriana. She couldn't understand the sudden shift in her academic performance. Side-by-side comparisons with Luz's assignments showed no significant difference, yet the grades were starkly contrasted. Adding to her distress was the sight of her overworked grandma, exhausted from juggling jobs. Adriana couldn't bring herself to share her struggles, fearing it would add to her grandma's burden. The upcoming parent-teacher conference loomed large, and Adriana dreaded the potential news of her fallen grades. The thought of letting down her hard-working grandma was a weight too heavy for her young heart to bear. On the final school day before the New Year break, classes were cut short. The teachers, eager for a break from the daily grind, were physically in the room, but their minds were already ringing in the holidays and daydreaming of their winter getaways. During fifth period, the history teacher, Mr. Evans, suddenly realized he was chalkless when he went to jot down a date. "Adriana," he said, eyeing her in the front row, "could you grab a box of chalk from the teacher's lounge for me?" He handed her the key. Adriana knocked on the teacher's lounge door but got no response. Using the key, she stepped into a room she'd never been in before. It seemed ordinary enough, a scattering of notebooks across tables, a coffee machine with mugs lined up beside it, some snacks strewn about, and a water dispenser. She spotted the designated table in the back piled with school supplies, from chalk to pens, paper, and even tennis balls. As she picked up the chalk, she accidentally knocked a tennis ball, sending it rolling under another table. Bending down to retrieve the ball, Adriana was suddenly interrupted by the sound of the door opening and familiar voices. "I've almost got everything ready for the holidays," the first voice, unmistakably her English teacher Miss Fernandez, said. "Did you send out the memo about the fifth grade parent-teacher conference change?" A second voice, most likely Miss Sanchez, the language arts teacher, inquired. "Of course. And guess who's not happy about it?" responded Miss Fernandez, a hint of amusement in her tone. "No surprises there, Mrs. Perez, right?" "Exactly. Ever since her husband became the school's top donor, she's been acting like she owns the place." They both chuckled. "Heard his business is doing pretty well." "Well, we know the rumors about that," Miss Fernandez added, the two of them laughing again. Adriana felt a mix of guilt and curiosity, torn between revealing her presence or eavesdropping further, especially when her class was the topic of discussion. But the next topic stopped her cold. "What's this I hear about Adriana Castro?" Miss Sanchez said with a hint of concern. "What about her?" Miss Fernandez replied cautiously. "I've been hearing things. She's a straight A student, but ever since the last parent-teacher meeting where Luz Perez didn't rank first, Adriana's grades have mysteriously dipped. It can't just be a coincidence." Miss Fernandez hesitated. "Look, kids go through things. Maybe there's trouble at home, or maybe she's got a crush. School can be tough." Adriana's heart raced as she heard Miss Sanchez walking, her steps getting closer. "Come on, Irene. You can't seriously expect me to buy that. Especially English. She got a D and Mr. Turner's barely present during tests. Half the time, kids are practically throwing paper planes. All right, Miss Fernandez relented. But you can't breathe a word of this, okay? After that last meeting, Mrs. Perez had a word with the vice principal. Next thing I know, he calls me in, goes on about how Luz has always been top of her class, how her parents are eyeing an elite school for her. They want her to maintain that top spot. And he hinted, to get some teachers on board. That's so unfair, Miss Sanchez sighed. Hidden beneath the table, Adriana's heart pounded loudly, her mind racing with the weight of the revelation. Irene, she's not exactly struggling. Irene's voice carried a hint of irritation. I didn't tell her to tank her grades, just enough to slip behind Luz. We keep everyone happy. In a few years, little Miss Perez heads off to her elite academy with accolades and praise. And in return, her dad probably gives our school a new stadium or a facelift. As for Castro, she'll still graduate as one of the best. Her grandma will be proud. She'll probably end up at a state college and might even come back here to teach. She won't even see the discrepancy. Teachers are always right. Irene laughed. Come on, we're gonna be late. Adriana listened as they gathered their things and left. When she finally got back to her history class, her absence barely registered to the teacher. He thanked her for the chalk, yet never wrote anything on the board. That evening, deep in thought, she waited for her grandmother. As Zoe Castro returned and hugged her tightly, Adriana said, "Grandma, you don't need that second job. I want to go back to my old school." Adriana later graduated from her previous school as valedictorian. At the ceremony, both Zoe and her close friend Luisa were in tears. Ignoring Irene's forecast, Adriana pursued law at a renowned university in Madrid. Overjoyed, Zoe remarked, "My sunshine. I'm thrilled. Just hope you'll be okay in that big city." Adriana smiled, "I'm more worried about you. How will you get by without me?" Zoe hesitated, cheeks pink. "What is it, Grandma? Do you remember Esther Poletto?" Zoe asked. "The theater's prompter?" Adriana recalled. "That's him." Adriana was intrigued. "What about him?" Zoe hesitated, then said, "He asked me to move in with him." Adriana gasped, "Are you two engaged?" Zoe laughed, "Oh, stop. Not engaged. He just thinks it'd be nice for us to live together." Adriana was shocked. "When did he first ask?" "About 5 years ago," Zoe admitted. Adriana's eyes widened. "Why wait all this time? How would it look?" Zoe shrugged. "Bringing a man into our home? What would you think? I told him if he cared for me, he'd wait until you were on your own." Amused, Adriana said, "Granny, you're something else. Poor Esther waited so long." Adriana had known Esther since she was a child. Sometimes at the theater, when no seats were available, he'd usher her into his booth. The view was magical from there. Like Zoe, Esther had lived alone for a while. He'd had feelings for her for the longest time, but only confessed a few years back. As Adriana left for Madrid, she felt at peace. Stepping off the train, she knew a new chapter was unfolding. Adriana felt overwhelmed. It seemed like her small hometown's train station had fewer people than this entire city. Shaking off her awe, she navigated her way to the university dormitory. The last time she was here with her grandmother to submit her application, Adriana was a bundle of nerves. Her grandmother, Zoe Castro, would point out landmarks and share stories, but Adriana's mind was preoccupied. Admission or rejection? Scholarship or full tuition? They couldn't afford the latter. When the acceptance news came, relief washed over her. She felt the toughest part was over. The dorm matron, a tall woman with a bit of a fuller figure, greeted her. Adriana was momentarily distracted by the shimmering pink eyeshadow the matron wore. When the woman spoke, Adriana was pulled back to reality. "So, Castro, which room do you prefer?" The studious bunch in 417 or the lively crew in 201? Adriana's initial thought leaned towards the studious group, but a spontaneous streak made her blurt out, the lively ones. All right then, the matron replied with a grin, handing her a key labeled 201. Suddenly, she shouted down the hall, I need a hand in here. A tall, sun-kissed blonde guy dashed in, stealing Adriana's breath away. You called, Clara Iglesias? His grin was infectious. Dorm 2's finest at your service. He mock saluted, his gesture more playful than formal. Marry me, Clara Iglesias, he declared, half-jokingly. Diaz. Act your age for once, Clara retorted. Ignoring her, Diaz turned his charm on Adriana, sliding next to her and brushing his knee against hers, causing her to startle. Resting his chin on his palm, he playfully pleaded with Clara, guide this wayward soul. I promise to become a model gentleman under your tutelage. Diaz, your antics tire me, Clara sighed. How about some actual help? Take the newbie's luggage to room 201. And wipe that smirk off, I know that look all too well. Don't even think about playing the charmer with her. Adriana's face turned crimson, though Diaz remained unfazed. Who, me? He feigned innocence, eyes widening theatrically. You must be mistaken. Clara, unimpressed, mumbled, I've seen the aftermath of your mistaken charms. Heartbroken girls, distracted from their studies. Before I could even swear my innocence. But Clara quickly cut him off. Diaz, knock it off and get moving. Grab Adriana's stuff to room 201, then come back and round up your crew. We've got mattresses to shift. Diaz gave Adriana a mischievous wink, easily hoisted her bags onto his shoulders, and sauntered off. Adriana whispered her thanks to the matron and trailed after him. Making their way through the hall packed with freshmen, Diaz glanced back and said, Name's Bern, by the way. Yours? Adriana. Sorry, can you repeat? Bern. Short for Bernardo. Got it. Back at her high school, Adriana mused, boys weren't this charismatic. Or as good-looking. As he walked ahead, she sneakily took in the view of his tan, muscular arms and athletic legs. It appeared the dorms had a relaxed dress code, given Bernardo's choice of a white tank top, casual gray shorts, and even pink flip-flops. She glanced down, wondering where he even found pink flip-flops in that size. Room 201 was at the corridor's end. With both hands occupied, Bernardo opted for a loud, heads up, and nudged the door open with his foot. Judging by the two made-up beds, Adriana deduced she was the final roommate to arrive. Looks like the coast is clear, Bernardo remarked, setting her bags beside the unclaimed bed. Anything else you need, Adriana? No, I'm good, thanks, she responded with a smile. Just holler if you need anything. I'm in 208. Won't be there, but Cielo and Eduardo will be. Let him know you know me, they'll have your back. Catch you later. With one last charming grin, Bernardo exited. The weight of the day suddenly bore down on Adriana. This morning she had bid farewell to her grandmother at their hometown station, and now she stood in an alien city, in a strange room, prepping to cohabit with two unfamiliar roommates. All she yearned for was to sink into bed, cocooned in her blanket. But first, she had to set it up. As she began to unpack, she appreciated the room's cozy aesthetic, pristine, pastel walls, almost brand new furniture, and even a fridge and a microwave. The microwave was a pleasant surprise. Just as she was finishing up, the door dramatically swung open. Accompanied by a spirited "Hey there," a tall, curly-haired brunette made her entrance and quickly embraced Adriana. I'm Eva, a sophomore in law. And you? Adriana, law 2. First year? Awesome. With that, Eva hopped onto the windowsill, flung it open, and casually swung a leg out. So, settling in all right? Eva queried. It's been good, Adriana replied noncommittally. What about you? It's grown on me, Eva smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. You know, I've got this gut feeling we're gonna be thick as thieves. Adriana chuckled. I hope so. In truth, Eva was something of an enigma to Adriana at first. If asked to encapsulate Eva in one word, Adriana would likely have chosen wildcard. Eva was a whirlwind of spontaneity. But her unpredictable nature never seemed to interfere with Adriana's own routine. Their third roommate was a veritable ghost. Upon one of Felicia's rare appearances, Eva whispered, "Here's the 411, Felicia's kinda shacking up with her boyfriend. Only crashes here after a spat or if she thinks her mom might pop in. And if her mom does drop by unannounced, what's our play?" Adriana inquired. "She won't just spring up," Eva smirked. "Her dad'll give a heads up. He's a bit more progressive, thinks it's cool if his grown daughter wants to live with her beau pre-wedding. But mom's the word around Felicia's mom. Old school vibes." "Gotcha," Adriana nodded. Though their paths didn't cross often, Eva became a treasure trove of campus knowledge for Adriana. She knew which profs were pushovers and which classes were, let's say, optional, even though Adriana wasn't one to skip. Eva lent her notes, aided with assignments, and always had the lowdown on the best sales in town. It astounded Adriana how Eva jibbled it all. It was clear Eva played hooky quite a bit. Her nights varied between bar crawls and mysterious midnight departures. One day, while they were sharing a rare quiet moment in the room, Eva casually remarked, "We should come up with a do not disturb system." "Like a sign?" Adriana was puzzled. Eva laughed. "Honey, it's high time you got the memo on what grown-ups might be doing when they want a bit of privacy. But I mean, to each their own." Adriana's cheeks flushed, less about the possibility of walking in on Eva and more about the thought of bringing someone to their room herself. A vivid image of Bernardo flashed in her mind. Why him of all people? Sure, they'd had some chance encounters in the dorm kitchen. They'd exchanged pleasantries, maybe some small talk. Yet, she'd become adept at maintaining her composure around him, especially given the stories she'd heard. She was determined not to be one more love-struck girl falling for Diaz's charms. Adriana pointed to a cutesy rabbit keychain hanging from their mirror. "How about this on the doorknob?" Eva gave an exaggerated look of contemplation. "A bunny?" "Oh, the irony. Kudos, Castro. That's cheeky." The girls exchanged glances and burst into giggles. A week later, the rabbit toy proved useful. Adriana walked back from her classes and spotted a familiar toy hanging on the door from afar. Instead of entering her room, she veered toward the kitchen, settling onto an old, worn-out chair stained with grease spots. Lost in thought, she pulled out a new book she had purchased earlier in the day and delved deep into its pages. She was so engrossed that she didn't even notice when someone stepped into the kitchen. "Does everything make more sense in the scent of frying dumplings?" teased a recognizable voice. It was Bernando. "Hey," Adriana greeted with a smile. "Needed a spot to chill while my room's taken." He gave a knowing nod. "I see, love's got its priorities." "Guess so," she responded. Bernando playfully sighed. "Why didn't you pop over to my room? More fun than sitting in a kitchen, right?" "Just didn't cross my mind," Adriana admitted. Bernando placed a floral-designed pot on the burner, suggesting, "Come on, consider yourself my guest." He peeked into his room, then announced, "Clean it up, guys. We've got company." He held the door open for Adriana, beckoning her inside. To her surprise, the guy's dorm room was tidier and more welcoming than she'd anticipated. She was introduced to Bernando's roommates, Cielo and Eduardo, all second-year geology majors. Despite her polite refusals, the trio treated her to homemade dumplings, sausage and cheese sandwiches, and coffee paired with what Bernando boasted was special pumpkin jam. The conversation flowed freely, touching upon their courses, dorm life, and Adriana's own law school experiences. When they learned she hadn't explored much of Madrid, Bernando playfully chided her. "That's criminal. A lively, lovely lady like you cooped up and missing out on the city's gems?" I'll take on the noble task of showing you around." Despite Adriana's protests about being busy and needing to study, they were dismissed with laughs. About an hour into their chat, Eva breezed into the room, a satisfied grin on her face. "I had a hunch I'd find you here," she teased, spotting Adriana. Bernando quipped back, "Well, we're the hotspot for everyone left in the lurch when their so-called friends are up to no good." Eva shot back, "Speaking of up to no good, that's your expertise, right? Let's head out, girl," she motioned to Adriana. True to his word, Bernando reached out to Adriana the following day for a short walk, assuring her it'd be quick so she could get back to her books. Since that time, they began hanging out nearly every day, with Bernando always finding a way to stretch their time together a bit longer. If the air was crisp, they'd duck into a local coffee shop for some piping hot brews. Adriana grappled with her feelings about him. On one side, she felt flattered by Bernando's attention, especially noticing the envious glances of other girls. Even with his playful demeanor, he was undeniably captivating, intelligent, and charismatic. But, on the flip side, she recognized that he was all too aware of his charms, having played his cards with many before her. While she wasn't opposed to dating him if he asked, Adriana wasn't keen on becoming another notch on his belt, labeled as just another freshman Bernando played. She had half expected him to make a move soon after they started spending time together. Maybe he'd wrap his arm around her during their strolls, lean in for a kiss, or find some pretext to drop by her room solo. Or maybe he'd invite her over to his. But he was all casual with her, like a close buddy. They'd hang out, he'd foot the bill at the cafe, and occasionally stop by just to check in on her. Nothing more. It left Adriana questioning if he even saw her in a romantic light. In her confusion, she sought counsel from Eva. Her friend, deep in thought, paused her toenail painting session to ponder the matter. "This is intriguing," Eva began. "Now, I don't claim to know Bernando inside out. He's a stand-up guy, he's not going to push anything. But, let's just say he's not renowned for holding back. If he's into someone, he lets it show. Whatever ensues, it's clear-cut, yes or no. While not many turn him down, some have. And he's cool with it. He just moves on." "But that's just it, Eva," Adriana vented. "Is he treating me like just another buddy, like Cielo or Eduardo?" Eva chuckled, "Stand here for a sec." She instructed Adriana to spin around, giving her a once-over. After a moment, she humorously declared, sadly, "No." "What do you mean, no?" Adriana queried, somewhat deflated. "Looking at you from every angle, you're definitely not like Cielo or Eduardo." "Eva. I mean, come on. No guy is just friends with someone shaped like you," Eva said with a wink. "Very funny," Adriana retorted. "I'm genuinely confused." Eva's tone turned more serious. "Look, if you really want answers, just talk to him. You're studying law, aren't you? Better get used to addressing awkward topics head-on." Adriana thought it over and decided Eva might be onto something, but chose to put the heart-to-heart on hold. The upcoming event on everyone's mind was the freshman initiation ritual. Eva shared tales from her own initiation the previous year, which involved silly and mildly embarrassing tasks. "It's like a throwback to medieval times," Eva remarked. "But in a twisted way, it's a blast. Word to the wise, we're something you won't mind trashing." The sophomores were in charge of organizing the initiation rites. Eva transformed a corner of their room into a makeshift workshop, bustling with the sounds of sawing, cutting, and other crafting. Adriana was forbidden to peek behind Eva's DIY curtain. Even the guys upstairs were tight-lipped about their preparations. As Adriana tried to focus on her studies, Eva's occasional mutterings from behind the curtain broke her concentration. After a while, Eva peeked out, mischief in her eyes. "Okay, partner in crime, I've got a mission for you." "What's up?" Adriana replied, setting her books aside. "Grab the key from beneath the mirror, head down to the storage closet on the ground floor, and snag the big red bag for me. It's the only one, so you won't miss it." Before Adriana could voice her understanding, Eva chimed in with her own spin. And just so we're clear, don't even think about peeking in the bag. If you do, we're done as friends. Oh, and don't try touching it, it bites. But I'll give you a little game, try to guess what's inside from any noises it makes. Roger that, Chief. Hands off the bag, Adriana responded playfully. The storage closet was dim and felt chilly. Adriana weaved her way between shelves lined with luggage, mattresses, and old linens. The red bag proved elusive until she finally found it hidden behind a bulky, aged blanket on the bottom shelf. Why did Eva stash it back here? Adriana wondered to herself. As she crouched to retrieve it, the door swung open, and an irritated female voice echoed. Seriously? Who keeps leaving the door unlocked and the lights on? Clara's gonna flip. I swear, we only asked for a little storage space. I bet I know who, another female voice interjected. Alvarez has the spare key. Probably her. That scatterbrain, the first voice retorted. Ready to jump in and defend her friend, Adriana paused when she overheard something that made her stomach drop. So, any word from Bernando? The second girl inquired. Is he swinging by later? Zip. Nada, the first girl huffed. He's vanished. But whatever, I'm better off. The second girl giggled. Oh sure, that's why you're all about him. Rumor is he's seeing the girl next door, Alvarez. You mean Gil? The first girl seemed taken aback. Didn't she move in with her boyfriend? No, the other neighbor. What? The disbelief was evident in the first girl's voice. That freshman? She's so plain Jane. I mean, the second voice shrugged, she's decent. A little makeup and the right outfit? She could be a stunner. Who cares? The first voice sneered, he's probably just toying with her. Don't be so sure. Heard from Cielo that Bernando's been spending a lot of time with her and it's all very innocent. Could be serious. Adriana heard the first girl utter a string of expletives. A sudden thump and a yelp of pain interrupted the gossip. Ada. Chill out, will you? Maybe they're just pals, the second girl tried to reason. Pals, my foot. Ada spat. Wait till the freshman initiation. I'm on drinks duty for them, I'll slip something in hers. Bet she won't make it to the restroom in time. She's in for a rough night, promise you that. Thinks she's all that? I'll show her what happens when you mess with my man. The girls took off, leaving Adriana alone, slumped on the floor. This was the first time she'd been the subject of such mean-spirited chatter. She hadn't done a thing to Ada, yet here she was, threatening toilet dunkings and laxative-laced drinks. Would her dorm life be pure misery from here on? Deciding to stay silent about the ordeal, she simply handed the bag to Eva from behind the curtain, muttering, "Here." Eva picked up on her friend's distress immediately. Peeking out from behind the curtain, she voiced her concern. "Hey, what went down?" Overwhelmed, Adriana's tears started to flow. Between sobs, she relayed the nasty threats she had overheard in the storage closet. Eva was seeing red. That jerk Ramirez. That wannabe. Oh, she's got another thing coming. Think she can mess with my friend like that? Just wait. Eva's fiery outburst was loaded with language Adriana had only heard once, when the janitor blew a gasket after some kids ruined his freshly raked leaves. Watching Eva's fury, Adriana wondered if spilling the beans had been a mistake. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted the moment. A heavily made-up girl peeked in, impatiently stating, "Alvarez, come on. It's go time." By her voice and attitude, Adriana recognized her as Ada, the same girl who had threatened the restroom revenge. Eva did too. Locking eyes with Ada, Eva shot back with a cryptic retort. Stomach issues, right? Whether Ada caught the hint or was just thrown by Eva's glare, she was eager to bolt. Yet another girl, lagging behind in understanding, was caught off guard when Eva, screaming a war cry, lunged at Ada, yanking her hair. Adriana was thrust into her very first ringside seat to a full-blown girl brawl. The chaos of it all was jarring, Ada and Eva yelling and flinging insults, Ada's friend adding her own hysterical shouts. Frozen in shock, Adriana watched the spectacle unfold until guys from upstairs rushed in. Bernando restrained a still-seething Eva, while Eduardo grabbed hold of Ada. Amid the bedlam, Ada's friend tried to clarify things to a bewildered Cielo. In the aftermath, Cielo and Eduardo ushered out the girls, while Bernando kept Eva at bay. "Lock the door and stash that key," he yelled at Adriana. Quickly obeying, Adriana slid the key into her jeans pocket. Once the door clicked shut, Eva's rage simmered down. Bernando, pouring water, remarked, "Thought tonight would be some mundane freshman initiation. But you two sure spiced things up." "Oh, please." Eva snapped back, her tone now lighthearted. "Maybe you should go babysit your drama queen ex. She's planning some restroom revenge and a laxative surprise. First off, she's not my ex. We were just close," Bernando started, "and hold on, laxative? What now?" Adriana wished she could disappear. This was playing out like some teenage drama where she was the naive protagonist, targeted by the villainous ex, saved by the dashing hero. Meanwhile, Bernando paced, trying to piece everything together. "Okay, time out," he finally said. "Everyone, take a breath. Now, start from the top and walk me through what went down." As Eva recounted the story, not exactly in a linear manner, Bernando tried to keep up. Once she finished, he sat back, rubbing his temples. "Man, you all stirred up some real drama," he said. "All three of you, Ada, and even you, Adriana. But I should have seen this coming. Let's untangle this messy web. First off, scrap the initiation. We're not going. They'll get by. I'll chat with Clara about the scuffle, make sure it doesn't blow up." Eva just rolled her eyes. "And about Ada," he continued, undeterred. "Like I said, there was nothing romantic there. I was clueless about her possessiveness over me. I promise." He then shifted his gaze directly to Adriana, holding her in a sincere stare. "She won't touch you. And lastly, will you be my girlfriend?" The question was directed at Adriana, who opened her mouth in astonishment. "You should say yes to that, dummy," Eva chimed in. "Yes," Adriana whispered. "Well, there you go," Bernando replied in an almost casual tone. "All right, girls, stay in the room for now, and I'm off to deal with the initiation, Ada, and Clara. There's a lot to handle." When Bernando left, Adriana approached Eva, hugged her tightly, and said, "Thank you." "For what, silly?" Eva responded, hugging Adriana back. "For being the best friend in the world." "Yeah, right. I'm just ordinary." Adriana didn't ask Bernando what he said to whom that evening, but he kept his promises. The initiation went smoothly. Eva wasn't punished for the fight. She got away with a half-hour conversation with Clara and a thorough kitchen cleaning. Adriana, of course, helped. And Ada never bothered Adriana again. Eva and Adriana became best friends for the rest of their lives. However, things didn't work out the same way with Bernando. Not that they didn't have 2 wonderful years together. He became Adriana's first boyfriend, and she would always remember the moment she hung the rabbit keychain on her door for the first time. But in the end, they were just too different. They broke up peacefully, with no regrets on either side. On that day, Eva and Adriana went to a karaoke bar as is tradition, sang songs about strong and independent women, and that's where it all ended. Adriana graduated from college decently. Not with top honors, not with a red diploma, but with a respectable GPA and solid 4s and 5s. Eva's influence likely played a role. She always stressed that it's not about grades, but about knowledge and experience. Additionally, now Adriana was embarrassed that she had indirectly, but still, referred to her boss as an old lunatic. Alberto turned out to be a humorous person. And not just for pulling pranks on interns, but also in his work. "Look, Adriana," he instructed her during their lunch break as they sipped coffee and ate homemade rolls. "You signed the internship contract without reading it, and I casually added in there that you have to come dressed as a flight attendant every 2 days and sing me the song Stewardess. I really like it." Adriana slowly chewed her roll and couldn't quite tell from Alberto Gonzalez's face whether he was joking or not. The man had an excellent acting talent, and deciphering him was practically impossible. "All right, I'll go find where to buy a costume," Adriana said quietly. Alberto burst into laughter. "I like you," he said, turning to Caterina Montero, his secretary. "We're hiring her." To confirm it, he slapped the armrest of his chair. By the end of her internship, Adriana had acquired as much knowledge and experience as half of the lawyers who had worked for a year. She had made quite an impression. Alberto Gonzalez swore he wouldn't let her go for anything. The next day, he was planning to go to the dean's office, demand an urgent diploma for the talented student, as there was no point in her staying at the institute any longer. Whatever was needed, he would successfully teach her. After receiving her diploma, Adriana decided to try approaching Alberto. Instead of submitting a resume or officially scheduling an interview, Adriana decided to visit him unannounced, in person. Some inner instinct told her that this was the right approach. Indeed, Alberto Gonzalez was present. Caterina recognized her, offered her coffee. And as soon as the boss became available, she informed him about Adriana. The man had hardly changed over the years, the same mustache, checkered shirt, and plain jeans. "Adriana Castro," he greeted her happily. "Or not Castro anymore." Adriana understood that there was a catch in the question. Some of her classmates had already gotten married and were now job hunting to secure official employment before going on maternity leave. "Still Castro. And I don't plan on changing my last name or producing new members of society under a different name for at least 10 years. "Oh, come on, not 10? Alberto smirked. "I'd settle for 5 or 6, and then feel free to have babies." The salary promised to the recent graduate was quite reasonable. On how to live on a small budget, Adriana had learned from Eva back in her sophomore years. "Comfort," her friend said. "Comfort is everything. If you need to decide how to use your money, think about what your priorities are. What's your goal in life right now?" "To graduate from university with honors, become a successful lawyer," Adriana answered without hesitation. Eva nodded. "A worthy goal. Now let's focus on the smaller things. What do you need to study well?" "Well, probably the same as everyone else: eat properly, get enough sleep, and have a place where I can prepare for classes." "There you go. My dorm, my room, and being my neighbor suit you?" "Absolutely. So, spending money on an apartment doesn't make sense for you right now?" Eva made an insightful observation. "Understood." Or another example, Eva hopped onto her soapbox. Her eloquence knew no bounds. However, Adriana didn't resist. Their conversation, after all, began with that. Adriana asked how Eva managed to look so good and never be in need of money. "Clothes. What do I need from clothes, for instance? Look professional at work, be comfortable at home, and be a sexy kitten on a date. And if I'm willing to spend 2 or 3 stipends on a work suit, there's thrift stores for everything else." Adriana remembered her friend's advice. She rented a room from a sweet elderly couple. The apartment was across from her workplace, so she saved on commuting and lunch expenses. The 3 classic suits from her student days were still serving Adriana well. For everything else, she turned to thrift stores. A trip there was akin to a therapy session. Even if a week remained until her salary, and her wallet was nearly empty, she could always enter a store where everything was 100 rubles today, and from a pile of shapeless rags find beautiful white cotton shorts or a light knitted lace top. And then go home happy and study. Adriana didn't stop studying. The first few years of work were tough. Alberto Gonzalez, despite all his jokes and smiles, was a strict boss. When he hired Adriana, he had warned her honestly. For the first 2 or 3 years, you won't see a bright day. You'll think many times that you're stupid or that everyone around you is treating you unfairly. In general, you'll become very disillusioned with people. But if you endure this phase, it'll get easier. Adriana had determination and diligence in spades. She was practically always at work. She ran errands, gathered documents, went to court, attended all proceedings where she could gain access. Alberto Gonzalez would tell her, "A good lawyer should be knowledgeable about everything. But a very good lawyer should have a specialization." Initially, Adriana didn't give much thought to what kind of cases she wanted to handle. Finally, she was entrusted with her first solo case. A couple was getting divorced after 10 years of marriage. Adriana was the husband's lawyer, a lazy, unkempt, unpleasant man in his 40s. He spoke reluctantly and abruptly, looking down on Adriana. Upon meeting his wife for the first time, Adriana thought she would prefer working with her. The wife was slim, beautiful, an affable and pleasant woman. However, Alberto Gonzalez had repeatedly said, "Adriana, don't evaluate the client as a person, as good or bad, likable or unlikable. Evaluate their case, that's the real task you must accomplish." And Adriana got to work. The couple had a prenuptial agreement, according to which all their property, which included a 3-room apartment in a good part of town and a few convenience stores, was supposed to be divided in half. But in case evidence of infidelity by one of the spouses was provided, each would retain what they had before marriage. Since the husband had inherited the apartment and business from his entrepreneurial parents, he would come out ahead. He was quite confident in his wife's infidelity, which was why he had filed for divorce. However, he hadn't provided any evidence and demanded it from Adriana. She explained that she wasn't a private detective and that evidence should have been collected before filing for divorce. Of course, Adriana used all legal methods to uncover the truth. Yet, either the wife was faithful, or she was hiding so well that nothing could be found. The case hit a dead end, the parties couldn't agree on anything, and the client was getting nervous and taking it out on Adriana, who became increasingly agitated. During one of the meetings with the couple, the wife was late. Adriana was sitting with the client, who for the 100th time repeated that he was sure his wife was cheating. He complained about paying exorbitant fees while his lawyer did nothing. "Yeah, exorbitant fees," Adriana smirked mentally. "This is my first case. He won't find anyone cheaper in this city." Apologizing, she excused herself to the restroom. Inside the stall, Adriana sat on the cold seat and closed her eyes. She had to seek advice from Alberto. She didn't want to, but she had to. The case had reached a deadlock. So, she'd have to admit to him that she had failed on her very first case. And suddenly, Adriana heard a familiar female voice. "Oh, please, I'm begging you." The voice's owner, presumably talking on the phone, said, "He won't prove anything in his life. I'm 100 times smarter than that idiot. I can't understand how he even figured out that I have someone." Adriana swallowed. She realized she was hearing the voice of the client's wife. She needed to go out and greet her, not eavesdrop. Not eavesdrop. "Marta, I'm begging you, you should see this lawyer." The sound of water running. "Yeah, probably just out of law school." You can tell from her frightened expression that she doesn't know or understand anything. "My idiot is already stuck." The sound of a paper towel being pulled from the dispenser. "All right, I'm definitely leaving now," Adriana told herself. Haha, if only this idiot husband would clean up the apartment, he'd find everything. The woman chuckled. "There's something left there, I need to go get it tomorrow. What if someone really does find it?" The sound of heels clicking and the creak of a closing door. A few seconds later, Adriana emerged. She opened the door to the meeting room with an entirely different demeanor. She confidently asked to reschedule the case for the next day due to new circumstances. After that, she led the client aside. "How far is that apartment where you lived with your wife?" Adriana inquired. About 20 minutes by taxi, he answered, looking puzzled. Apparently, Adriana had changed so dramatically that the client hesitated to ask her anything. Upon arrival at the apartment, it definitely needed cleaning. Adriana began her search. She struggled to understand what she was looking for. But fate was on her side that day. On the floor behind the bed's headboard, covered in dust, was a small note, the kind you usually attach to flowers. Adriana picked it up with trembling hands. "Mi amor, thank you for the wonderful weekend. Yours, Cello." Below was a date. "Cello!" the client shouted. "Cello! Seriously?" He then proceeded to mutter a string of expletives and walked toward the exit. Adriana hurried after him. "Wait!" She blocked his path. "Do you know Cello?" "It's hard not to know your own brother," he grimaced. "Did you suspect they were involved?" The client suddenly looked deflated. Adriana firmly took his hand, not understanding why she was acting like this. But she was sure she was doing the right thing. She poured a glass of water and said, "Drink." Alberto Gonzalez's voice echoed in her head, reminding her that simple actions can have a calming effect on a person. Therefore, in moments of shock, offering water and asking for a pen or something similar can be effective. Adriana repeated her question gently. "So, did you suspect that your wife was involved with your brother?" He nodded. "I saw he was in love with her. Since the day of our wedding. It's hard not to notice when you're experiencing the same thing yourself. But I didn't pay attention, we had just gotten married. Elisa was crazy about me, and my brother was only 16 then." He sighed. It seemed he had completely immersed himself in the past, unable to believe how things had turned out. And now he graduated from a prestigious university, works at the embassy, spent a few years abroad, the man continued. He returned a year ago, looking quite handsome. Elisa even said, "Wow, look how he's grown." He started visiting us often. I was happy, I didn't realize what was happening. But now I understand. And that date on the note, she said she was going to her mom's. But she was actually with him. At that moment, the client ceased to be an unpleasant, untidy man and became a simple victim, deceived by his wife and betrayed by his own brother. Adriana felt a pang of sympathy. She held a pause and said, "I sincerely sympathize with you. I believe we can finish this tomorrow." During the meeting, Adriana presented the note. The wife blushed, then paled, and then started screaming that it didn't prove anything. The husband sat silently, not looking at her. Adriana waited for her to calm down and called in a witness. When the husband's younger brother entered, the wife surrendered. She burst into tears, but Adriana, for some reason, didn't feel any pity. The case was won. In celebration of her first case, Alberto Gonzalez enthusiastically uncorked a bottle of champagne, which he unfortunately spilled on the table and sofa, much to Katerina's dismay. He ordered food and announced that work would end early today as they were having a banquet. As Adriana walked home, Eva called. "Hey, friend, long time no see. Want to meet up today?" "Sure." "Great. Let's meet at our cafe across from the main building in an hour. Can you make it?" "I'll manage." "All right, sounds good. Kisses." Eva hung up, and Adriana thought that an old friend was just what she needed after such a long and challenging month. Moreover, she hadn't seen Eva for probably half a year. After the second glass of champagne, Adriana decided to open up. "You know, Eva, I have this feeling that all the important things in my life happen without my control. It's like I overheard something somewhere, and it influenced my destiny. And when I was a child, I felt like I was somehow ugly and bad, and all the good things only came about that way. But my grandmother used to say that eavesdropping is not a good thing." Eva looked attentively at her friend. "So that's what's bothering you? Listen, sweetheart." Eva moved closer, took Adriana's hand, and looked into her eyes. "You're the smartest, kindest, most interesting, and hardworking person I know. You've earned all the good things in your life. And consider your almost miraculous ability to be in the right place at the right time a gift, not a curse. Maybe fate is rewarding you for your efforts." Adriana laughed and hugged Eva. "You really are a good one, you know that?" "You bet." Eva replied. "Let's order a second bottle." After her first case, Adriana finally felt confident. She realized that she was fortunate to have overheard the conversation, but she also decided to heed Eva's advice. Perhaps her ability truly was a gift from fate. However, Adriana also believed in her own hard work, intelligence, and determination. After 9 years under Alberto's guidance, Adriana became a true ace in divorce proceedings. "There's nothing in the world more complicated and yet simpler than relationships between spouses," commented Alberto Gonzalez when Adriana told him about her desired specialization. And, as usual, he was right. The most complex processes were grounded in the simplest circumstances. One of the spouses desired either love or money. On the 10th year of working with Alberto Gonzalez, he called Adriana into his office. "It's time for you to open your own firm. Hire people as smart and talented as you, and teach them," he began without preamble. "Are you kicking me out? Am I getting old and tiresome?" Adriana chuckled. "Oh, Castro, you and your jokes," the man sighed. "There's nowhere else for you to grow in my little office, and I don't have the right to keep you here. You've learned everything and, in some cases, you handle them even better than I do." Adriana opened her mouth to object and realized she had nothing to say. Indeed, the last few cases seemed too easy to her. Her interest in work had even waned somewhat. She thought it was just coincidence or perhaps burnout that everyone experiences. But Alberto's words seemed to awaken something within her. Adriana envisioned a massive sign in the classic style, a brown background with golden letters "Law Office of Adriana Castro," and she felt her heart race. She would have a large office, take on the most complex and intriguing cases, and pass on her experience to young, green graduates, just as she had been a few years ago. Alberto Gonzalez, "Dear, how did you know about this?" "Adriana, how many years have I lived on this earth? I know everything, see everything, feel everything." Adriana rushed to her boss and hugged him gently yet firmly. Alberto Gonzalez discreetly wiped away a tiny tear. "How could I do without you?" Adriana said, loosening her embrace. Alberto Gonzalez chuckled. "My little bird, I'm not planning on dying anytime soon. If you need advice, come over. The doors are always open for you." The beginning was challenging. Not as challenging as starting a new job, but being a subordinate and being a boss were entirely different things. Adriana managed, with Alberto's advice. Eva, always omnipresent with her network, also helped. And most importantly, Adriana's confidence helped her. She believed she could do it all. Looking at the freshly renovated space, Adriana brought Zoe and Esther Poletto. Despite their venerable age, this couple was lively. Apparently, love was keeping them strong. Adriana had long suggested buying an apartment or house for the elderly couple in a convenient area, but they flatly refused. "We're fine where we are," Adriana, Zoe Castro would reply. "Our pensions aren't the biggest, but you and Esther's grandkids help us all the time. We have more than enough to live on. Esther's house is lovely. We're slowly tending to the garden, strolling around the village, listening to music, or watching new TV series. Indeed, daughter, there's no need for us to create a new nest in our old age," the man would respond. "Visiting you or the grandkids is always welcome. But there's no greater pleasure than returning to our quiet, familiar home." The office made a big impression on Zoe. "It's like a theater, isn't it, Esther?" she asked. "Yes, there's something to that," the man replied. "It seems all businesslike and strict, but there's a touch of art and beauty present." Adriana laughed. She had been involved in designing the office, but until this moment, she hadn't thought of bringing a piece of her childhood's beloved place to work. With time, everything fell into place. Reaching a new level greatly aided Adriana. Naturally, her income grew as well. She bought an apartment in a prestigious new neighborhood, a car, and tried to travel for a vacation at least once every 6 months. Mostly with Eva, whose years and work hadn't diminished her appetite for entertainment. So, Eva said as they sat on the cool white chairs of a beach bar, tanned to a shade of red, "When are you getting married?" "What?" Adriana laughed. "Who is this your marriage you're talking about? Come on." Eva waved her hand, signaling the bartender to make another cocktail. "I'm a free bird, and you want to build a nest. You've been postponing and dragging it out. Like, I'll finish my education, I'll build my career. Well, mother, excuses are running out. It's time to walk down the aisle. So, when? What makes you think I want that?" Eva shrugged. "I don't know, my intuition tells me. You're tender, kind, caring. I can picture a wonderful, worthy man right by your side." "I don't know." Adriana also requested a second cocktail. It was easy in college. In the dorms, in classes, in clubs, even just out for a walk, someone was always trying to get to know me. Then came work. Now I don't even know where to find this wonderful, worthy man of yours. Eva nodded and put on a serious face. She pulled a straw out of her drink, carefully licked it, and, holding it up to Adriana like a magic wand, pronounced, "I summon a rain of suitors upon you." Adriana nodded and held her hand up with her palm facing up. "Dry as a bone," she said. "These suitors aren't trickling in." "Just wait," Eva said, putting the straw back in her drink. "It'll happen." And as if on cue, Adriana met Adriana a few weeks later at the gym. She always maintained a good figure, but she thought that 35 was the age to take up sports. Adriana signed up for her first trial session with a personal trainer. She chose this gym because it was in the adjacent building. The trainer was running about 10 minutes late, and Adriana stood there, feeling nervous. She felt as though everyone was looking at her in her new expensive sportswear, standing awkwardly in the middle of the gym. "Excuse me, for God's sake, Adriana." A breathless voice came from behind her. "I'm ready for any punishment." Adriana turned around. A tall blond man with big, clear eyes and such a white childlike smile, dimples on his cheeks included, was looking at her. He looked so sincerely sorry for being late that it was impossible to be mad at him. They found common ground immediately. Adriana didn't feel awkward or embarrassed. Eladio patiently repeated the exercise instructions when Adriana didn't understand. He ensured her safety without being overbearing. Certainly, Adriana began attending Eladio's workouts regularly. Gradually, they started conversing as friends. She told him about herself, how she had been involved in sports during her youth. She even won prizes in track and field events at the European Championships. She had been preparing for a career as an athlete until she got injured. "After that, I had to forget about professional sports, and besides, I don't know how to do anything else," Eladio confessed, blushing shyly. A month later, he nervously, looking even more adorable for it, asked her out for a walk. Adriana agreed, and that's how their romance began. She wasn't bothered by the fact that Eladio didn't have his own apartment, a high income, or a formal education. For the first time in a long time, she felt loved and happy. They got married 6 months later. The wedding was modest. They invited Zoe and Esther, Eva, Alberto and his wife, Adriana's firm employees, Eladio's parents, his older brother and wife, and a few friends. They gathered in a cozy little cafe. After the wedding, the newlyweds went on a 2-week honeymoon to Bali. Eladio moved into Adriana's apartment, of course. His workplace wasn't far away, especially since his schedule was flexible. If a training session got canceled, he could run back home. Adriana continued working and enjoyed her status as a wife. Moreover, there were housemaids, Flora and Felipa, who took care of unpleasant household duties, cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, and so on. Adriana even rented a 1-bedroom apartment for them in the same building. Adriana's role as a wife consisted of only pleasant responsibilities, to love and be loved. At first, Eladio felt embarrassed, saying it was shameful to live on his wife's money. But gradually, he got used to it, took on fewer training sessions, and boldly spent money from Adriana's card. She didn't object. Eladio looked good, often inviting her to luxurious restaurants or coming up with new ideas. He knew about modern art exhibitions, interesting concerts, and thanks to him, Adriana dared to skydive, ride a quad bike, and attend a strange fashion show where actors cursed, smoked on stage, and periodically doused the audience with cold water. However, lately, Adriana had been noticing that something wasn't right. Eladio often went out somewhere without warning and refused to tell her where he had been. He was spending much more money. Adriana thought that he might be compensating for deficiencies from his childhood, and she hesitated to bring up the conversation. But now, here was that conversation in their apartment. Adriana couldn't have imagined that the truth would be revealed to her like this, unexpectedly, because of a forgotten phone in the apartment. She cautiously walked deeper into the apartment and saw Eladio with his back to her. He was sitting on the couch in the living room, with a young woman on his lap. All Adriana could see was the fiery red mane of her hair. But even that was enough to recognize Felipa, her housemaid. "Well, kitten," Felipa sang sweetly, a tone Adriana had never heard from her before. "Felipa, come on, what nonsense are you talking?" "We're doing just fine as we are," Eladio responded. "Just fine?" Felipa's voice raised to a shriek. "What do you call just fine? We spend time together, sleep on this luxurious bed, go on dates, and I buy you clothes, take you to restaurants." Indeed, just fine, Adriana thought. If I were Felipa, I'd be perfectly content. What's the problem? I want more, as if she was answering Adriana's unspoken question. How long can I be a maid in my lover's house and watch that vile old hag paw at you? For a moment, Adriana thought about inserting a remark. Maybe telling her that, according to Felipa's opinion, she might be old, but she certainly wasn't a hag. Yet, her instinct told her that the most interesting part was yet to come, and her legal instinct suggested that she should retrieve her phone. "We were planning to kill her, remember?" Felipa continued. "Felipa," Eladio reproached her. "What, Felipa?" "Well, what, Felipa? You told me you loved me and wanted to be with me." "I remember, we just have to wait." "Yes, how much longer?" The girl exclaimed angrily. "I don't want to slave away for peanuts anymore." Adriana remembered that it took Felipa 2 years of working as an attorney on an 8-hour, 5-day week to start earning more than just a pittance. And Felipa worked 3 days a week and could leave early if she finished her tasks. "Felipa, well, how do you imagine this?" Eladio mumbled. "We need to think things through." "What's there to think about? You're a husband, she's your wife. You didn't make a prenup. If she dies, everything will probably go to you." "Felipa." Eladio seemed to be losing his temper. Adriana found this amusing. "How do you imagine that? For me to stab her with a knife?" For some reason, Felipa laughed. "Silly. I've always known you're a little cowardly fool." She playfully kissed Eladio on the nose and wrapped her arm around his neck. "I've already taken care of everything myself." "What?" Eladio looked at the girl in surprise. Felipa casually nodded. "Yep, I cut the brakes in her car. I'm sure the ambulance or the police will call you within half an hour, saying something like, 'Your spouse is dead.'" "Felipa, you're crazy." Eladio's voice expressed fear and concern. "Here, I'll agree with that," Adriana spoke up. They turned to look at her, like little children caught by adults doing something wrong. Like scribbling on walls or eating jam. Adriana looked at Eladio. She thought she should feel pain, bitterness, the urge to cry, or on the contrary, throw a fit, throw vases, grab Felipa's red hair. But instead, she just wanted them gone as quickly as possible. "I recorded your interesting dialogue where you're planning my murder and sent it to a few reliable people. If you don't want to end up in jail, you have 10 seconds to leave my apartment and my life for good." Eladio looked at Adriana with his blue eyes, and she suddenly remembered that this was the same helpless and mournful expression he had when he talked about how a car hit and killed his beloved dog. Adriana, he began. 9, Adriana warned in a cautionary tone. Then I'll call the police. 8, 7, 6. Felipa proved to be quicker on the uptake. She grabbed Eladio's hand and literally dragged him to the exit. When the door closed behind them, Adriana locked the interlock and sat on the floor in the hallway. The phone rang. Adriana, Eva's voice came through the receiver. What the hell did you just send me? Adriana burst into tears. She no longer felt the need to be strong. She cried like she did in her distant childhood when she fell off her bike and scraped her knee. Adriana and Eva sat under the cherry trees at the sturdy table that Esther had made about 30 years ago. Adriana simply told her grandmother that she was getting a divorce without going into extra details. Esther listened, exchanged glances with her husband, and took Adriana's hand. The four of them sat for another half hour, after which Esther stood up. Zoe and I are going to take a walk, he said, and you girls stay here, get some fresh air. After those words, he brought a second bottle of cherry liqueur from somewhere in the barn, placed it on the table, and winked at Eva. Zoe Castro brought a plate of cabbage pastries, and the couple left. When the door of the house closed behind them, Eva asked, Are you sure you don't want to press charges? What if they try again? Adriana shook her head. I don't think so. I made it clear to Eladio, if anything happens to me, the recording will go straight to the police. And I've gathered other evidence of their connection, surveillance camera footage, receipts, credit card statements. They didn't hide it very well. I just didn't notice, I was naive. Eva nodded and poured them both another shot. You know, Adriana continued, I remember your words. Which ones? Eva raised an eyebrow. About eavesdropping. That it's my gift to be in the right place at the right time. I listened to them that time. So, it turns out, you saved my life. Oh, come on. Eva awkwardly brushed her cheek with her hand, then jumped up and hugged her friend. For a while, the two friends sat in silence. Then Eva asked, What do you plan to do next? Adriana sighed. First, I'm going to try to piece my life back together. I'll take a short break and go home. Home? Eva didn't understand. What do you mean? I'll head to the small town where I grew up, Adriana explained. My little hometown. You know, psychologists often write that the place where our childhood was spent is a place of strength. I used to think it was all nonsense, but now I really feel drawn back home. I want to walk along familiar paths, see how things are there now. Maybe even visit my old school. Eva nodded. I understand. Maybe we've finally grown up, you and I. You're drawn back home, and me. What? Adriana held her breath, asking. I guess I'm going to get married, Eva admitted with unexpected shyness. Adriana rushed to hug her friend. That's news. And you kept quiet. I want to meet this person. Has he given you a ring yet? Not all at once, her friend grinned. I, being a modern woman, decided to take matters into my own hands and propose to him. I think I'll do it on Monday. He works at our firm. We've been dating for about 3 months. And I figured, why wait? Adriana nodded in admiration. Well, you go, girl. Who doesn't take risks, doesn't drink champagne? Eva winked at her. And you, go ahead, head to your little hometown, reboot yourself. When you're back, we'll find someone for you too. You know, I'll pass for now, Adriana sighed. I've had enough of it. And most importantly, don't have the wedding without me. How can I have a wedding without my witness? Eva smiled. I promise we'll choose the dress and everything else together. Just don't linger there too long, come back. Adriana nodded. I promise. For her journey, she deliberately chose a train, taking a plane would make everything happen too quickly, like jumping into water. Here, she was immersing herself in the past slowly, gradually. Madrid was left behind, suburbs flashed by, villages. As she gazed at the endless forests and fields passing by, Adriana remembered riding to college. Back then, as a young girl, she thought she was embarking on a journey towards a new, happy life. But now, she believed that she had sought happiness where it shouldn't have been sought. Her happiness had been lost somewhere, and how to find it, by what signs, wasn't clear. Her grandmother had long sold the apartment. She and Esther had been living out here in the countryside for years. Adriana stopped at a hotel and went to revisit her childhood town early in the morning. She visited the park, the square. As she entered the courtyard where her childhood passed, her heart skipped a beat. Much had changed here. New swings had appeared for the kids, but the old mushroom in the sandbox remained the same. And the linden trees growing by the entrance had only grown taller over the years. As she approached the school, Adriana felt a certain unease. Would she recognize anyone there? What if none of the teachers who had taught her were alive anymore? Her worries intensified when Adriana saw not the elderly gatekeeper at the entrance, but a young and sturdy security guard. "Who are you here to see?" he asked, eyeing the visitor suspiciously. Adriana, with an unexpected timidity for an experienced lawyer, shrugged. "Actually, no one in particular. I'm an alumna. I studied at this school many years ago. I wanted to see familiar places." "This isn't a museum for you to wander around," the guard replied arrogantly. "If everyone starts wandering and looking around, there will be no peace." "Wait, does Luisa Serrano still work here?" Adriana asked. She suddenly realized that this was the most important thing. If her beloved teacher wasn't here, then Adriana had no business at the school. Because it would mean that the place had lost its soul. Before the guard could reply, a skeptical voice sounded nearby. "Adriana?" She turned around. Luisa Serrano stared at her in astonishment, bent and aged, with a head now tinged with gray, but still, it was her, Adriana's homeroom teacher. They hugged. Luisa Serrano, ignoring the guard, said, "Roberto, let the girl through under my personal responsibility." The man frowned but didn't say anything. As they moved away from the guard's booth, Adriana said in surprise, "He listens to you so well." "He better listen," the teacher smiled. "Remember how much trouble I gave him back then? He was quite the scamp." "How have you been, Luisa Serrano?" Adriana asked, lovingly studying the familiar face. "Are you still teaching?" The woman nodded proudly. "Yes, I'm still teaching. Every year they hint that it's time to retire, but I hang on. Right now, I'm teaching the third graders. With them, I feel useful, alive. What else is there to do at home? Watch TV and knit socks. You haven't changed a bit." Adriana smiled. "Still as lively as ever." "And you, Adriana, you're still the same as you were," the teacher smiled. "Although you do look like a respectable lady now. Well, I can see that inside, you're still the same modest Adriana. Do you still read Cervantes sometimes?" "No," Adriana replied with regret. "I haven't picked up a book in ages, everything's been so busy. Work or family issues, one after the other." The bell rang in the corridor. Luisa Serrano shook her head with regret. "I have to go to a faculty meeting." "Forgive me, Adriana, let's meet in half an hour. You probably wanted to wander around the hallways anyway, right? There couldn't be a better moment. The whole school will be at your disposal now, no one will stop you. And then we can catch up thoroughly, my rascals will have physical education." "Agreed," Adriana nodded. "Then we'll meet in the same place in half an hour." Adriana walked slowly through the school corridors, looking around. Of course, much had changed over the years. The walls had changed color, from yellow to beige, but the spirit of the school remained the same. Boys rushed by, full of energy. On one of the benches, a serious-looking girl sat with a book, recognizing her former self. Adriana approached the Russian and literature classroom and peeked inside. The students were chatting animatedly in the teacher's absence, paying no attention to the guest. Then someone shouted, "Look out! Teodor Mendez!" Adriana turned around. Behind her stood a man with glasses, young and intellectual looking, somewhat resembling a writer. Adriana could have sworn she knew him. She had sat next to him so many times, secretly annoyed when he peeked into her book. Apparently, the teacher recognized her at first glance too. "What a surprise!" Teodor said warmly, smiling. "Unfortunately, we're past Cervantes now. Today we're discussing 100 Years of Solitude. Would you like to join the class?" Adriana smiled in response. Maybe to find her happiness, she didn't need to go far. Was her happiness standing right in front of her? And a year later, Adriana was welcomed from the maternity ward. All her loved ones, along with Eva and her husband, and that very Teodor who used to annoy her in school and now became the most beloved man in the world, were there. "It's a girl? I knew it. You're all so secretive. Who's supposed to be born there?" Eva hugged Adriana and popped the champagne. "Eva, you shouldn't. You're pregnant yourself." "Hugo, just a little for my friend. And I'm only a month pregnant. Don't worry, my dear son." Eva's husband smiled and handed Adriana a bouquet. "Congratulations on the daughter. What did you name her?" "Marta. Like my mom. Let her rejoice for us up in heaven." "She will definitely rejoice, granddaughter." Zoe Castro wiped away a tear and picked up the granddaughter. "What happiness has come into our family," she said softly and crossed herself. "Thank God everything worked out for you, Adriana. I'm very happy for you, dear." "And I'm so happy, Grandma." Adriana closed her eyes in happiness and sighed with relief. "Now, I'm the happiest woman in the world, and I don't need anything more."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.